The sun was just dipping behind the hills when Maria, the calm and steady wife of the biker club's VP, pulled into the quiet parking lot behind her cafe. She had finished a long day of work, the kind where all she wanted was a warm shower and a moment of peace. But before she could even take off her helmet, she sensed something off. A group of strangers stood near the back door, watching her a little too closely. Their voices low, their steps slow and calculated. Maria tried to stay calm, hoping they would simply leave, but the air around her felt heavier with every second. Back at the clubhouse, her husband Logan was laughing with the crew, unaware of what was unfolding. Everyone respected Maria for her kindness and the way she supported the community. She was family, and family meant everything to the club. When Logan's phone buzzed with a shaky voice message from a cafe worker saying Maria might be in trouble, the room shifted immediately. Conversations stopped. Faces hardened. No one asked questions, they just moved. Maria tried to make her way toward the cafe door, keeping her distance from the strangers, but they stepped forward, blocking her path with quiet, unsettling confidence. She felt her heartbeat rise, unsure of what they wanted or why they were there. At that very moment, the sound of motorcycles echoed faintly in the distance, her only hope. But would the club arrive in time, or was something far bigger waiting behind this unexpected threat? The rumble of the motorcycles grew closer, but Maria couldn't tell if it was the club or someone else entirely. She kept her back straight, trying not to show fear. The men didn't touch her or say anything threatening, but the way they lingered, the way they watched her every move, made her skin crawl. She wondered if they knew who she was, if they understood that messing with the VP's wife was something no one in town would dare to do. Still, something about them felt different, almost like they didn't care about the usual unspoken rules. Inside the cafe, the lights were still on, and Maria thought about running inside to call for help, but the strangers stood just close enough to make her doubt whether she'd reach the door safely. She took a small step back, keeping her eyes on them while pretending to adjust her jacket. They didn't react, just continued to observe, almost like they were waiting for a signal she couldn't hear. Meanwhile, at the clubhouse, Logan was trying to piece together what little information he had. The message didn't say much, only that Maria wasn't alone and something felt wrong. Logan knew his wife's instincts were sharp. If she seemed uneasy, then something serious was happening. He gathered a few trusted members, the ones who always rode with him when things got tense, and they headed out without another word as they turned onto the road leading to the cafe. Logan couldn't shake a feeling he hadn't had in years, a warning in his gut that this wasn't random. Someone had planned this. Someone had waited for the perfect moment, and Maria was right in the middle of it. Maria kept her helmet in her hands, pretending she was just taking her time, but her eyes kept scanning the lot. The strangers shifted their weight now and then, glancing toward the road as if they were expecting someone else. That detail bothered her. If they weren't after her, then who or what were they waiting for? She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that panic would only make things worse. One of the men stepped slightly forward, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to make her nerves spark. He asked if the cafe was closed, his tone calm but oddly rehearsed. Maria answered politely, trying to read his expression. Something about him felt too controlled, as if he was hiding a different intention behind that practiced calm. The others exchanged looks, subtle but noticeable, and Maria realized they were communicating silently, almost like they'd trained together. As the club rode closer, Logan's thoughts raced. He couldn't ignore the fact that lately, small things around the cafe felt off. New faces hanging around, unfamiliar bikes parked a little too long nearby, and a recent rumor about a group passing through town looking for leverage against certain clubs. He hadn't shared the details with Maria because he didn't want her worried, but now he regretted it. Back at the cafe, Maria wasn't the only one noticing the tension. Inside, her young employee Tasha peeked through a small side window. She had stayed late to finish cleanup and had a bad feeling the moment she saw the men arrive. She grabbed her phone to send Logan another message. But before she hit send, one of the strangers turned his head sharply, as if he sensed he was being watched. The approaching motorcycle engines grew louder, but whether they would bring safety or ignite something far worse remained painfully unclear. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as the motorcycle engines grew louder, the vibrations rumbling through the ground beneath her boot. She tried to stay calm, but every instinct screamed at her that the strangers weren't just loitering, they were waiting for something. The tallest one stepped closer, tilting his head as if reading her hesitation, while the others fanned out slightly, blocking any easy escape. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Inside the cafe, Tasha's hands shook as she held her phone. She wanted to call Logan again, but she hesitated, knowing that any sudden noise could draw attention. She quietly backed toward the back, hoping the strangers outside hadn't noticed her. Her mind raced with what-ifs. What if they were armed? What if this was just a setup to lure Maria into danger? Meanwhile, Logan and his crew were only a few blocks away. The road was empty, and the fading light made it harder to see, but Logan could feel the urgency in the air. He glanced at his riders, his jaw tight. "Stay sharp. Something feels wrong. We're not just here to pick her up. This is bigger," he said, his voice low but firm. Every second stretched painfully as the cafe came into view. Outside, the strangers were now whispering to each other. Maria noticed subtle hand signals, a silent coordination that made her realize she had underestimated them. She tightened her grip on her helmet, ready to defend herself if needed. While a bead of sweat traced down her temple, the first roar of the club's bikes echoed behind the strangers, startling them. Their heads snapped toward the sound, and for a moment, everything froze. The strangers, Maria, even the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Maria's pulse raced as she watched the shadowed figures of Logan and his crew speed toward her, but a sudden movement from one of the strangers hinted that the confrontation was about to explode, and no one could predict how it would unfold. Just as Logan's crew thundered closer, the strangers outside shifted in a way that made Maria's stomach drop. One of them, someone she hadn't noticed before, pulled something from under his jacket. It wasn't a weapon at first glance, but the way he held it made it clear he intended to use it as leverage. Maria's breath caught. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was calculated. Tasha, hidden behind the counter, snapped a quiet photo with her phone, hoping to send proof to Logan. But her fingers trembled so much that the image came out blurry. Every second dragged, and the roaring engines in the distance seemed to grow louder and louder, pressing against the tension like a drumbeat, counting down to something inevitable. Meanwhile, Logan noticed a second car slowly rolling onto the side street, moving toward the cafe in a way that suggested it wasn't an accident. His brow furrowed. Whoever was behind this had more than one plan. They were ready for contingencies, which meant Maria's danger was far greater than he first imagined. Maria's eyes darted between the strangers. She realized that one of them had stepped slightly closer, their shadow falling across her path in a threatening way. She tried to calculate her next move, but the ground felt unstable beneath her, and the world seemed to slow. Just then, one of the strangers whispered something under his breath, barely audible, but enough to make her blood run cold. From the distance, Logan and his crew's motorcycles cut sharply around the corner. The strangers turned, startled, but it wasn't just a confrontation waiting to happen, it was a trap unfolding. Maria's pulse raced as the second car began to move in, closing in from the opposite side, and she realized with horror that this situation was far more dangerous and twisted than anyone could have predicted. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as Logan and his crew skidded into the parking lot, engines screaming and tires kicking up gravel. The strangers froze for a split second, then chaos erupted. Logan's crew moved with precision, surrounding the area and forcing the men back. Maria ducked instinctively behind a car, heart hammering, while Tasha stayed low, phone in hand, capturing everything. The tallest stranger tried to make a move toward Maria, but Logan intercepted him in a blur, grabbing his arm and pinning him to the ground. The other men panicked as the club closed in, their plan unraveling faster than they had expected. Logan's voice boomed over the commotion. "Nobody touches my family." Each word carried authority and warning, making it clear the club wasn't just defending Maria, they were delivering a message that no one would forget. As the strangers were restrained, the second car screeched to a halt, and the driver stepped out. Maria tensed, expecting another threat, but it was a familiar face. The cafe owner, holding up his hands in apology. He had tried to warn Maria about suspicious activity earlier but hadn't wanted to escalate things unnecessarily. The tension broke slightly, but the adrenaline didn't fade. Maria finally stood, shake,